A 2011 journal on a medical ethics out of activities in India did not prove Bill Gates or child polio vaccine paralyzed 47,000 people or 48,000 were killed in India. That is the video I put up where I explained this, and it's fairly simple. These were people coming in to get their first vaccination who showed up with paralysis. That's it. And the complaint from the people doing this medical ethics story, where it got convoluted or just ignored and just used as a fake source by anti-vaccinationists, were just complaining that they didn't think it was possible to eradicate polio in India. They just said it was impossible. In 1988, there were 350,000 diagnosed cases of polio, and it caused paralysis in children, or killed them. 1997, the last case of wild polio happened in the United States. 1999, type 2 was eradicated worldwide. That includes India. The year 2000, there were only 719 diagnosed cases at all, which may be the reason they thought there was no point in doing this. And then 2 years later, type 3, the last time it was known to cause a case, type 3 poliovirus was eradicated. Guess where? So their medical journal on ethics, talking about how you can never eradicate polio entirely from India, was wrong a few years later. Maybe just a few. 2016, the last wild polio case in Africa happened as an endemic country having it. And that was in 2016, Nigeria. So the only places left on that day, or very nearly after it, wasn't India. So they were simply wrong about their assertion. The whole point of that medical ethics thing about Bill Gates, if you want to make it about Bill Gates, was they thought it was a waste of money and time, and they wanted to do another method, increase sanitation, and then talk about vaccination, because it worked so well in the United States, done by 1970s, because we had good sanitation most places. The reason for that is that polio, if you have it, you excrete it. And if you have good sanitation, it's harder for it to transfer. It still transfers, but it's not as easy. But if you don't have sanitation, you're not going to get rid of it. But they did, because they did a massive effort to vaccinate everybody, and the specific vaccine they used actually gave a person a virus, a weakened version of it that would make it to where when you had it, it would leave your body within 6 months, and then you could no longer get infected, much less get sick, from any form of virus. And they had 3 versions of it in a trivalent version. All 3 types were weakened and put together as a triple shot. But after 2012, type 3 and type 2 were gone. And by 2016, the last case happened in Nigeria. In 2016, they decided to switch it to bivalent, only covering the 2 most recently occurring ones, type 1, and at that point, it would have been type 3 still. And it's changed since then. It now just uses type 1 normally. In 2016 also, they had only 37 wild cases confirmable. Suspected wasn't included in the list that I'm looking up on a graph. They also had 5 confirmed vaccine-derived poliovirus cases. What this means is that in some cases, the poliovirus that was weakened genetically enhanced itself to become dangerous again in some areas. Now that was based primarily on type 2, which isn't really needed anymore and hasn't been for a while. So they should simply remove it. I mean, all they need to do is immunize against any of them. And they only have to do type 1. So that was 2016. Now this happened in areas with poor sanitation because even though it was vaccine-induced, it still transferred the same way. Poor sanitation. Just wash your hands and keep yourself clean and don't have any exposure to anything excreted as urine or fecal material. Both. Peeing on the sidewalk can transfer polio. Peeing your pants and not cleaning your pants often enough can do it as well, because it's a virus and it can stay on surfaces for variable periods of time depending on what's going on. Kids pee themselves sometimes. Okay, so do grown-ups. Some of you poop yourself. But anyway, they also had low vaccine coverage in some cases. In fact, this is the only reason this happens. You see, if you're vaccinated and don't get sick, because people assume you're going to die from it, you don't have the ability to harbor the disease long enough to transfer it, and you don't have the ability to be harmed by it. And if you do, again, these trivalent vaccines or whatever, if they used weakened versions, you're basically virally infecting everyone around you for around 6 months if they haven't already been immunized, in such a way that they're immunized with something related to it, but weaker, that we engineered, that makes it to where you can't get the disease anymore. And it lasts for a very long time, many years, but you are infectious with it for up to 6 months because it's weakened, but not weakened in time. Now, this originally was a benefit, but then the thing started mutating. The number of vaccination-induced cases was 5 in 2016. 5. Now, that's not a big deal. And that adds to the 111 since the 1960s they detected in any form. And it's mostly through the oral vaccine, which by definition does not contain mercury, you fucking idiots. Now, what that meant is, from 1960 to the year, let's say 2010, 60, that's 40, over a 50-year period of time, 5 decades, you only had 111 cases caused by the vaccine. But that somehow is, according to anti-vaccinationists, an attempted genocide. Well, what about the ones we don't know about? So you're claiming not knowing cases have happened means they have to have happened in large numbers. So that's 111 over 50 years. So they switched to a polio vaccine in 2016 that only covered the most recent one that hadn't been completely eradicated, and the oldest one, type 1, that still exists in only 2 areas now. 2017 was the first year where we had more cases of vaccine-induced stuff. Polio virus in the wild was 22 versus 96 induced by the vaccine version. Whichever one you found, you should stop distributing, right? You shouldn't vaccinate anybody. But if you vaccinate them and they don't get sick and it doesn't mutate, then you're immunized against the vaccine-induced mutated version. Now this brings up a problem. The only 2 places that we found outbreaks in that are the original real deal are 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan. And if you gave everybody a vaccine at the same time that doesn't have the ability to mutate in any way, that would be what I would do. It would almost entirely eradicate it, but you might have a few cases of real polio, which is very dangerous, but it can't mutate. That's the big problem, because it went from 111 over 50 years to 96 in about 1 year. That's a major difference. But that's worldwide. 2019, they had 176 cases from the 22 previously, 2 years earlier, the wild cases in Pakistan and Afghanistan. They had 378 vaccine-derived cases. That was happening in the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, and Indonesia. Wild polio virus type 1 is the only one that's in the wild and should be immunized against only. But in places where they have vaccine-induced stuff, what it really means is the vaccine turned back into real, now I would call it wild, although that's not its origin story, type 2. So what they need to do is vaccinate against type 2 exclusively in those areas, because that's all that's happening. It's not the endemic type 1, and where it's only type 1, they should only vaccinate against type 1, and they should only use methods that cannot mutate. The only way to do that, because vaccines are very talented at mutation, is to use non-live copies. That means they're going to have to use old school vaccines like we used for the normal flu and that sort of thing, which means they're not going to work very well, but give it a time for us to get rid of the vaccine-induced stuff. Now, that's 378 cases, latest numbers from 2019. We only know about it retroactively. In Afghanistan and Pakistan, they've only got type 1, so that's all they should be immunizing against. And in Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, and the Philippines, because it was only 300 fucking cases, they should be exclusively doing a vaccine against the variety they found, which is probably type 2. It's the only one that's ever listed anywhere. And they should do type 2 vaccines that can't mutate, meaning it uses non-live copies. It's less effective. It doesn't do the community spread fix as well, but they've only got 300 cases that they have to worry about. Now, that was 2019. Over this much time, it takes 6 months for the stuff to kick around a lot. We may have almost no cases. Someone then claimed that there hasn't been a polio case that's wild since 2020. Obviously, by me just looking this up at all, that's not true. Someone also commented, oh wow, the minutes of work you must have done to look this up. All you're doing is emphasizing, mocking me. All you're doing is emphasizing that it's easy to look up and you have to go out of your way not to look up shit and stay ignorant. The other thing person says is, all you're talking about is vaccine-caused viruses. No, I'm not. And again, this was about 2011 Journal of Medical Ethics, where they didn't say that Bill Gates caused a bunch of vaccine-induced diseases. They were talking about people showing up before ever being vaccinated having the disease. And it was polio at the time. The timing of type 3 being eradicated was 2012, and type 2 eradicated was 1999. So it was probably type 3, because it was a year later in India. It could have been vaccine-induced if you want to say so, but you'd have to claim it was caused by not the vaccine, but the live weakened disease used as a vaccine mutating, which is what they do anyway. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with all that.